Whew, foreclosure. Just saying, it feels kind of heavy, you know. It's a
Yeah,
lot to deal with for anyone.
it really is, yeah. And the uncertainty and stress can just be overwhelming.
No kidding.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. We want you to know that you're not alone, and there are options out there, even when it feels like there aren't.
Exactly. And often, just knowing what those options are is a huge step toward taking back some of that control in a situation like this.
Absolutely. So to help with that, we're doing a deep dive into foreclosure, especially here in Dallas, because it can get kind of complicated. We're looking at this article from Redpin Properties. They're a local real estate company, and they've got some really solid advice on dealing with the whole foreclosure process.
Yeah, they do. And I have to say, they don't sugarcoat things, which I appreciate. They use this analogy they call foreclosure quicksand, which might seem a bit dramatic.
A little bit, yeah.
But honestly, it really drives home the point that time is absolutely critical here.
Yeah, that's for sure. And they get into that in the article, how in Texas, there are these specific steps the foreclosure process has to follow. First, there's the notice of default, then the notice of sale, and then, well, the actual foreclosure sale where they.
Bring down the gavel.
Exactly. And that's what you want to avoid at all costs.
Absolutely. And the key thing for anyone listening who might be in this situation is to remember that at each of those stages, you still have options.
Okay, so no panicking, but definitely no dragging your feet either. Got it.
Hmm.
So instead of getting bogged down in all the scary parts, let's talk action. I love that Redpin lays out this step-by-step plan, super helpful. And step one is to communicate with your lender.
Which seems obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people avoid that call.
Right. But they say it's all about being proactive, not waiting for things to escalate.
Absolutely. And documentation, documentation, documentation. Keep track of every phone call, every email, who you talked to, when, what was said, everything. And you know what else they recommend? Certified mail.
Oh, interesting. For any letters or anything like that?
Exactly, because that way you have proof that your lender actually received it. It's all about covering yourself.
Smart. Okay, so step two is all about knowing your numbers, which I guess means.
Knowing what your house is actually worth right now, how much you still owe on your mortgage, and having a realistic idea of what it'll cost to sell, like closing costs and all that.
Right, right. So getting everything out on the table, financially speaking.
Exactly, because that's how you figure out if a traditional sale, where you'd ideally make a profit, is even an option, or if you're looking at something like a short sale, which is a whole other ballgame.
Makes sense. So once you've got a grip on where you stand financially, then it's time for step three, figuring out your options for selling. And that's where things get kind of interesting, right?
Mm.
Because Redpin breaks it down into these three main paths you can take.
Right. You've got your traditional sale, a short sale, or selling to an investor.
So three very different approaches.
Yeah. And each one has, its own pros and cons depending on your individual situation, how much time you have, all of that.
Let's break those down a bit for everyone listening, starting with the most familiar one, probably a traditional sale.
Sure. That's basically your standard real estate transaction. You list the house, hopefully for more than you owe on the mortgage.
Find a buyer, everybody's happy.
Ideally, yeah. But then there's the short sale.
Which, to be honest, I don't fully get.
Okay, so a short sale is when you owe more on your mortgage than what your house is actually worth right now. So basically, you're asking your lender to accept less than what you owe to avoid the whole foreclosure thing altogether.
Ah.
And this is but the lender has to agree to it. They have to approve the short sale.
So there's no guarantee that'll work.
Exactly, which is another reason why acting quickly is so crucial.
Because the clock is ticking.
Always. And then we've got the third option, selling to an investor, which
Which is where a company like Redpin Properties comes in.
often, yeah, because they specialize in buying properties quickly, usually with cash.
Which, for someone facing foreclosure, probably sounds pretty good.
It can be. Speed and certainty are definitely huge advantages when you're in a time crunch. But, like everything, there are trade-offs.
Like what?
Well, you might not get as much money for the house compared to if you went through a traditional sale. It's always a balancing act.
Right, figuring out your priorities. Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense. So we've got our three options. What's next?
Step 4, act decisively.
Which, I'm sensing a theme here.
Time, yep. Every day counts. And the article actually lays out this timeline to really emphasize that.
And honestly, the last time frame on that list was a little scary.
Less than 30 days before the foreclosure sale.
Yikes. Talk about cutting it close.
Yeah, at that point, you're really in the red zone. And talking to a lawyer isn't just a good idea, it's essential.
So if someone is within that 30-day window, you're saying, stop everything, talk to a lawyer first.
Absolutely. because they can navigate those final stages, make sure everything is done by the book, protect your rights. It's too risky to go it alone at that point.
Got it. Okay, so we've covered the typical foreclosure process, how important it is to act fast, and some potential options for selling your home quickly. Now, let's talk about red pin properties a little more specifically. They seem to be presenting themselves as a solution for people facing foreclosure, but
Oh, are they?
like, are they the real deal?
Right.
That's what I'm wondering because, people need to know if this is a good option or not.
Right, of course. And based on what I see in the article, they seem to be offering a lot of what a homeowner in this situation would need.
Okay, like what's specifically?
Well, they talk a lot about speed, for one thing, and how simple the process is, and that certainty of a sale, which,
When you're facing foreclosure, that probably feels like, whew, what a relief.
right, just imagine that weight off your shoulders. And they even mention a 7-day closing with a cash offer.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a whole lot faster than a traditional sale.
Yeah.
I mean, just getting pre-approved for a mortgage can take weeks, even if everything goes perfectly.
Exactly. And with a traditional sale, there's always that chance the buyer's financing could fall through at the last minute.
Oh, true.
With a cash offer, that's not even a factor.
Okay, but even if red pin properties seems like a good fit, this is still a huge financial decision for anyone.
Massive. And we always have to say this deep dive is meant to be for informational purposes only. This isn't financial advice or legal advice, and every situation is different.
Right. And that's exactly why talking to a qualified real estate attorney is always a good idea if you're facing foreclosure.
100%. Because they can help you figure out the best path for your specific circumstances.
Okay, so I guess the big question is, where does all this leave us? We've covered a lot about foreclosure, and honestly, it's kind of a downer.
Yeah, it's not exactly a light topic, that's for sure. But what I appreciate about how Red Pin Properties approaches it is that they're upfront about how serious it is, but they also leave you feeling like you can do something about it.
Right. It's not totally hopeless.
Exactly. Like they're saying, hey, this is tough, but we get it, and we're here to help you understand your options. And that knowledge, that understanding, that's powerful.
It really is. Knowing what you're dealing with and then taking action,
Hmm.
that can make a huge difference.
Absolutely.
So if there's one thing our listeners take away from this whole deep dive, it's that foreclosure is complex. It can feel completely overwhelming, but you're not powerless. There's always something you can do.
I love that. So true. And as you're thinking about your next steps, here's something to consider. What level of risk are you comfortable with?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, because for some people, it's about getting as much money for their house as possible, even if it takes longer. But for others, it's about minimizing the stress and just getting it over with. Figuring out your priorities is huge.
Such good questions to ask yourself. And hey, if anyone out there is dealing with this right now, please know that you're not alone. We'd love to hear from you, your experiences, your advice.
Absolutely. Sharing those stories helps everyone.
And no matter how difficult it gets, remember, there's always a path forward. This is just one chapter in your story. Thanks for diving deep with us today.